Garrett Crochet is willing to stay, however, the team seems motivated to trade him this offseason. What is the best route for the Sox to take with their ace's future? Let's discuss next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network. Also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, Garrett Crochet was one of the few bright spots during this miserable season. He said he wants to stay long-term, but a recent report has the front office motivated to trade him in the offseason. So let's discuss why he is likely to be moved in the first segment. Then another Kansas City Royals bench coach might get consideration for some big league skipper jobs. Should the Sox look into hiring Paul Hoover? And then who is ready to watch some good baseball? Let's talk about how the playoffs can be a nice cleanser after enduring this awful season. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, leave it to the White Sox to head into the offseason with dark clouds hanging over them instead of bright skies. The dark cloud that will be hanging over the club is not the lack of spending or the possibility of hiring Plan B, Grady Sizemore, as the manager. Instead, it'll be the constant trade speculation of ace pitcher Garrett Crochet. The everydayers might remember back in July, I was a die on this hill, keep Crochet, and I still am, okay? Extending him will accomplish three things. One, it will signal to the fan base that this franchise is willing to reward the players they develop instead of trading them the first chance they get. Two, it will likely finally stamp the franchise's unwillingness to hand out a contract over $100 million, the going rate for premium talent. And yes, if Tyler Glasnow can get a 5-year, $136 million deal, so can Crochet. Three, he can anchor a potential franchise. He can anchor a potential franchise turning around rotation through the rest of the decade. Because if there's one thing that you can have hope on, White Sox fans, it is that the Sox have a ton of promising young arms. We already saw it even in just 3 starts. Sean Burke, he's got the makings of a stud. Jonathan Cannon has already shown that he can at least be, at best, a very good number 4 pitcher. Drew Thorpe showed that he could potentially be an ace in the mold of Aaron Nola and Mark Burley before, an arm injury ended his season. So you still got hope. And Davis Martin could be a very good 5th starter. So you've got a lot of hope, and there's still a ton of young arms with the potential to be very good pitchers in the big leagues. But instead, what ownership will do is stick to its guns and never pay high dollars for pitching because it always avoids the risk of paying pitchers. The owner will not pay pitchers because, heaven forbid, they might get hurt. And the front office will convince itself it has enough pitching depth that the team will not miss the only players on the active roster, the only active player on the roster who had an F4 above 2. Think about that. Garrett Crochet was the only player on the White Sox roster that finished the season in a White Sox jersey with an F4 over 2. That's right. Crochet was the Sox only valuable player this season. He finished the season with a 4.7 F4. He was the only player that really had any value whatsoever, according to Fangraphs. The Sox only had one other player with an F4 over 1, and that was Chris Flexen, who finished with a 1.3 F4. Now, if you prefer baseball reference wins above replacement measurement, or better known as B-WAR, Crochet finished as 4.1 wins above replacement. The Sox had just 4 other players with a B-WAR above 1. And one of them is, ironically, Luis Robert Jr. And I think I know some people say, well, Fangraphs calculates wins above replacement better than baseball reference. And one of the arguments I would say is Luis Robert Jr. was absolutely horrible this season. There's no other way to put it. He was terrible. He was booty cheeks, as former Locked On White Sox host Herb Lawrence would say. And he finished with a 1.4 B-WAR. And the eye test would even tell you there's no way he was even 1 win above replacement. Yes, he was very good in the field. and he did hit 14 home runs. But for a guy that hit 38 home runs the year before and was a stud to fall that dramatically and miss that many games with an injury, there's no way you could say, yeah, that guy definitely had some value. He was an under 1 wins above replacement. So it's the eye test. And yes, I agree. The calculation with FWAR is just a much better stat. That's why I go with FWAR over BWAR. But you would think the Sox would want to keep a pitcher who finished with a 3.58 ERA and a 2.69 FIP, along with 209 strikeouts and 146 innings pitched, especially one that's 26 and left-handed. Instead, according to USA Today's Bob Nightingale, an unofficial spokesman for the Sox front office, he reports the White Sox starter Garrett Crochet says he's interested in signing a long-term contract extension, but the White Sox still fully intend to trade him this winter, with the Philadelphia Phillies among the teams expressing interest. Okay. Of course, it makes sense that the front office wants to trade Crochet. Why pay him in the offseason when the team is just trying to cut payroll? And that's just another way to get him off the books and keep the bottom line where it needs to be for the owner to be satisfied. Plus, they've already signaled they're going to be patient now. Owner Jerry Reinsdorf, he's going to be patient. So why pay a guy when you can just trade him away and get more younger assets? And I understand the logic to trade him. You got plenty of young, talented arms behind him where you might not even miss him. You have a pitching guru in Brian Bannister, who seems capable of continuing to develop good pitching, and you still need a boatload of young impact bats. And Crochet is, the last valuable player you have left to get those types of players. You're gonna have to keep Luis Robert Jr. this year. If you're gonna try to trade him, you got to hope he can reclaim his value. I don't see any team giving up the necessary value for what Luis Robert Jr. can be when we've seen that he's healthy for the Sox to trade him this offseason. They're probably going to need to keep him. They're probably going to have to try to look at trading him, I would say, in the next offseason. But, I would advise caution in the thinking that you should trade Crochet because he's the only one left that can get you the impact bats that you need to eventually become a competitive team. One, I maintain context matters. And if the chief revenue officer is saying the team needs to earn back the fans' trust, one olive branch to extend is actually extending one of the few players you have worth watching. It would be nice to say, okay, we want to earn back your trust. We're going to keep Garrett Crochet. We're going to keep him through the rest of the decade. At least you got something to watch every 5 days. And also, he can help us win, maybe down the road, because again, win will always be parentheses maybe for the White Sox until they prove they can actually win. Also, in the context of keeping all these young pitchers, if you keep trading them away like you did with Dylan Cease and then possibly Crochet, you send the message that this club will not pay you. So write out your time here. You're not going to get rewarded. You're not going to be really valued. And if you want to fix this clubhouse culture and you want to fix the stigma of being cheap, well, first you can start, by upgrading the way you travel, but, actually upgrade the way that you reward your players. Reward them and actually pay them and stop paying them team-friendly deals maybe sometimes. Maybe sometimes you just got to bite the bullet and be like, here, Garrett, here's a 6-year, $140 million deal. And if I'm Garrett Crochet, that's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for the Tyler Glasnow deal. And 3, I don't trust GM Chris Getz to meet the moment of getting 150% return on the value of Crochet, because that's what you need to get. You can't just get, equal value. You can't just get 125% markup. You need to get like 150, 200%. It's got to be the same demand that you had at the trade deadline. At least 2 impact bats that are very, very close to the major league level. Probably another pitcher that's close, that has promise, and then a scratch-off lottery prospect. And I will say, I'll give Getz his flowers. He did a nice job with the Dylan Cease deal, but he completely fumbled the Eric Fetty trade. And you can't be going 1 for 2 on such pivotal trades when you're already perceived to be undeserving to have the job. You got to keep meeting these moments. And Chris Getz has only met one moment, and that was the Dylan Cease deal. And that was just basically the Padres saying, you know what, screw it. We're going for it again this year. Here's our 2 top pitching prospects. And the Sox need bats. And the bat that they got, Seby Zavala, not Seby Zavala. I just forgot the game, but the bat they got was a total washout at single A. So you got to hit on these trades if you're going to be trading away premium assets. And no one gets, he's going to drag this out throughout the entire offseason, probably into the spring training, because he's going to demand the moon and the stars, and rightfully so. But he's going to do that because, the one thing he's established, he ain't trading somebody unless he gets his price. And is that a good idea to have that cloud hanging over the franchise, trying to recover from a miserable season, to be like, is Garrett Crochet going to be here next season? And, it was detailed in ESPN's Jesse Rogers and Buster Olney's story that not having Cease did kind of affect the Sox to start the season. A lot of the, players were, players outside of the organization were perceiving what the heck happened to the White Sox pitching. Now, obviously, it rebounded because of Crochet. Instead, pay the man his money. Have a rotation of Crochet, Jonathan Cannon, Sean Burke, Davis Martin, and Drew Thorpe. And know that the rotation can get even better with top pitching prospects Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith not being too far behind. And then have in your back pocket young arms like Jairo Iriarte and Peyton Polite to build a bullpen around. And you can even have some of these guys like Mason Adams and Kai Bush and even Nick Nastrini, if he can find his command. You can use them to build a very cheap and effective bullpen, because if everybody keeps saying that the pitching is going to be how the Sox turn things around, you can't just have starting pitching. You've got to have the bullpen. You got to have the whole kit and caboodle. And all the Sox had was starting pitching. And, use some of those extra young arms that you might not be able to get into the big league rotation or the bullpen to make a few shrewd moves to maybe grab an impact bat, or, sneakily grab an impact bat. But alas, you and I, we're just going to get business as usual, and that means Crochet will probably be traded in the offseason. Well, there's another Kansas City Royals bench coach possibly under consideration for at least one vacant manager job. Should the Sox talk with Paul Hoover about their opening? Let's discuss next on Locked On White Sox. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, and you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. And Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. So let's see, something simple as picking more or less, available in most states, and can get your money quick. Sounds like the place I want to use to get my selections in. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value to your lineups. PrizePicks, run your game. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, follow or subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcasts, as Locked On White Sox is available at places such as Apple and Spotify. And again, I would love to be, say again, you can't watch me on YouTube. Maybe you got to rake some leaves this week after you get done with work. Got to mow the lawn, which I need to do. Or again, you're just stuck in traffic, especially if you got to take the Kennedy. I'd like to think I'm an excellent audio companion who especially gets you through, hopefully I got you through the White Sox season, and then maybe I can get you through the off season. So, I'm here for you. I'm here for you either in the flesh in the video or hopefully with my dulcet tones. So I am in the camp of the Sox needing to break free from this following whatever the Kansas City Royals do. First, they don't have a legit stud like Bobby Witt Jr. Well, they did in Luis Robert Jr., but then the losing broke them. Also, they're not going to spend this offseason like the Royals did last offseason to turn things around. So can we just stop with the White Sox being maybe potentially like the Kansas City Royals? Like, well, the Royals turned around after losing 100 games last season. It's not going to happen. They don't have the building block. They got to hope that Luis Robert Jr. can return to a, 2 F4 player next year. For him to even, that's not saying you have a stud that you can say, this guy's going to elevate your game. He's going to elevate you to winning like Bobby Witt Jr. did to that lineup. And then, again, the shrewd offseason moves that they made. I don't even know if they have a GM that's capable of doing that. And also, two things ruin the Sox ever being associated with the Royals for me. And it's not because the Royals are a division rival. The first was obviously Chris Getz last offseason, signing a bunch of former Royals because, he had a background with them. I mean, I get he had to shop at the bargain bin, but the guys he signed were either bad, like Brad Keller, washed up, like Mike Moustakas, or he just didn't keep, like Jesse Chavez. Either way, maybe if he went outside his comfort zone, he would have found maybe some better players off the scrap heap. Instead, he went with a bunch of these former Royals who helped, was on the laundry, on the Dead Sea Scroll list of reasons why the Sox lost 121 games. Second, Pedro Grifol did ruin things for me when it comes to hiring anyone from the Royals organization. And if the Royals do not want to promote a guy, you should run away from that person as if they're on fire. I mean, think about it. The Royals had a manager opening and did not give it to Pedro Grifol, and then the Sox just ran to him. And there's a good reason why. Obviously, the Royals passed on being like, you know what? We're not going to promote Pedro. But Paul Hoover is being speculated to be in the running for the Miami Marlins job. And the more I read about him, I think, hey, he might not come with the odor that Grifol did. And that is why I want to bring up Hoover as a possible candidate for the Sox job. And the valid reason is he came from the Rays organization, actually. So he doesn't have the complete stink of a former Kansas City Royals bench coach potentially being the Sox manager, because he at least would have been washed off with his time with the Rays, where I believe Pedro, he was just nothing but a Kansas City Royals guy. I want the Sox to hire a qualified candidate from either the Tampa Bay Rays or the Cleveland Guardians or the Milwaukee Brewers. And again, keyword qualified. I just don't want them to pick anybody from that organization. But if the Sox are never going to spend like the big market team they actually are, because you got to remember, the Sox are in Chicago now and for the foreseeable future. We always think that there's the potential that they could be moving at some point. But as of right now, as long as Jerry Reinsdorf is on this world, they're probably going to still be in Chicago. And they should stay in Chicago. It's the third biggest market. Everydayers know I had an episode where, they're going over the air with the Chicago Sports Network. There's 600,000 TVs that don't have a streaming service or don't even have cable or satellite. That alone, that's one of the reasons why they're going over the air. And then they can get on more TVs, more packages. Guess what? That's a bigger reach than, say, going to Nashville or Utah. Just saying. But if the Sox are never going to spend like a big market team, then they should be operating like these three small market clubs that keep finding ways to be competitive year after year after year. So bring in someone who can help them show this is the way that these three teams do it. Now, I will accept going with someone from the Los Angeles Dodgers organization because ideally you want the Sox to eventually be like them if they can just get a new owner who realizes, hey, this team's in Chicago. I should draft and develop like the Dodgers do, but I should spend money like they do on players that would put the team over the top because that's what the Dodgers do. They do an excellent job of drafting and developing or signing in the international market, and especially in the development. They know that because they realize, hey, having prospects can help me trade for impact players. And then anything my system doesn't yield, I'll just sign a guy to put me over the top. Like, yeah, I'll just go sign Shohei Ohtani. Also an attraction. Our owner laughed at the idea, though. Although Clayton McCullough doesn't exactly thrill me in that he's the first base coach for the Dodgers, and he never played above the big leagues. That just gives me huge Pedro vibes. Anybody that the Sox could, consider that has never played in the big leagues just gives me just very, very scared Pedro Grifol vibes. Because one of the things that I've noticed when guys don't play in the big leagues, I've just seen this in years of observation and covering baseball and just surviving the Pedro Grifol experience. They come in with this chip on their shoulder. And it's like, you don't want a manager with that type of chip on his shoulder. You want the manager to have a chip on his shoulder that, hey, we're going to go and beat you. But you don't want him to be like, I was never in the big leagues, so I had to get all this knowledge, and I have all this knowledge, and I know everything that I'm doing, and you should listen to me because, gosh darn it, I have this knowledge. And it's like, well, can you explain to a hitter who's going through a funk from a place of empathy and a place of I've been there before, and it's going to get better if we just keep doing the work? No, I don't think Pedro was able to do that. Now, does Hoover give off those Pedro Grifol vibes? First, here's the snippet from Ken Rosenthal's piece in The Athletic about the Marlins being interested in Hoover. Among the potential candidates, Cleveland Guardians bench coach Greg Albernez, who is a member of Kapler's staff in San Francisco, Dodgers first base coach Clayton McAuliffe. So, timeout. The Sox aren't the only team interested in him. Back to the article there, whom Kapler hired as Los Angeles minor league field coordinator during his tenure as farm director. And Royals bench coach Paul Hoover, who was a coach with the Tampa Bay Rays from 2019 to 22, while Marlins president of baseball operations Peter Bendix was in the Rays front office. Side note, though, Rosenthal doesn't list anyone for the Sox job. Here's what he wrote. The White Sox still seem likely to make an outside hire, assuming someone wants to take over their record-tying, as of now, 120-loss juggernaut. There are only 30 of these jobs. Someone will. Best of luck to that poor soul. I mean, that just shows you, good Lord, how sad the White Sox are. I mean, obviously someone's going to take the job, as there are only 30 of these jobs. But I like how he points that out, because the key is, do you get your dream candidate like Terry Francona? No. And Terry Francona is the dream if he wants to come back to managing. And again, for those that are about to put in the comments, I'm aware that he has health issues, but there's reports that if his health is feeling better, he is going to come back to managing. There is speculation, okay? So when you mention that, are you going to get somebody like Terry Francona? No. Are you going to get your top target like Skip Schumacher? No, because the Sox never win a bidding war. But someone better than Grady Sizemore who wants to be a skipper will probably jump at the chance to manage the Sox. And maybe Hoover is better than Grady and Pedro, because obviously that's the floor. You got to be better than these guys. So let's see his background. He did play in the majors, although not much, just 40 games and 7 years as a catcher. Basically had some cup of coffees with the Rays, Marlins, and Phillies. But he did have a career, which obviously puts him above Pedro. However, Sizemore's career carries way more weight, since, he made actually all-star teams. Probably one of the best players to always get hurt, as they say. Prior organizational experience before going to the Royals, Hoover was the Rays minor league manager for their rookie ball team. That's where he started. He was the rookie ball manager. Then he was a roving catching coordinator, and he eventually came up as a coach in 2018. And you know how much the Rays prioritize development, so you hope he has an extensive background in teaching the game. The Sox are likely to bring up top catching prospect Edgar Caro, so it would not be a bad idea to have him tutor the young lad. He was also the Rays fielding coordinator, and the Sox desperately need someone to help them make sure they are positioned correctly. Obviously, analytics will help them there, but if you can get a guy that came from a very analytical background team like the Rays, that could help with the defense. And Hoover has been given credit for helping the Royals improve their pitching. This was a report in MLB.com's Ann Rogers back in 2023. The overarching theme to the Royals spring training so far is for their pitchers to fill up the strike zone as much as they can. Baseball America recently looked at a simple way the Rays help pitchers improve control by having their catchers set their target in the strike zone rather than the corners. Catchers are trying to set their pitchers up for success by targeting the middle of the plate and letting the pitcher movement work. Hoover confirmed the theory. Quote, "It's something we've seen work in Tampa, power arms throwing to the bigger areas instead of moving to the corners and smaller areas. When they miss, they're still missing in the strike zone. We see similar pitchers over here that have power, that have stuff, but maybe not the best accuracy and pinpoint control. If we give them the whole plate instead of the corners, they're more apt to throw strikes. That's something that we need to help the pitchers do in the organization, is to fill up the zone and try to get ahead of our hitters," end quote. So, hey, you could take this thinking and combine it with Brian Bannister's thinking, and you might have something to help even amplify the good starting young pitching that you have. He sounds like he's a smart guy, has a background with the Rays. That can wash off the stink of replacing Pedro Grifol. He did replace Pedro Grifol in Kansas City as the bench coach. And suddenly, see what the Royals are doing. But someone being associated with the Royals, possibly coming over to the Sox, it's still very leery for me. But reading up on him too, he's still not my top choice, but I think he's interesting, intriguing. Can't hurt to have a conversation with him. All right, so good baseball is going to be on the rest of the month. So if you suffer through the 2024 Sox season, let's discuss how the playoffs can be a nice cleanser next on Locked On White Sox. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And I always say FanDuel is great for props, parlays, and futures. Um, Say you think the randomness of October will finally shine upon a small market team like the Milwaukee Brewers or the Kansas City Royals, and they'll finally win in October. Well, the Brewers are at plus 1900 to win the World Series. The Royals are at plus 2500. Even the heavy favorites like the Dodgers, they're going off at plus 350. So $10 on them, that could yield you $35 if they win at all. And again, you can build some really fun parlays. They got great props, like you can put in wagers on, or you can put in bets on, you know, who's going to hit a home run. I know Francisco Lindor last night, they had a prop on him. He hits a home run. So I'm just saying it's really great for, props, parlays, and futures. And sure, they got the traditional over-unders and the money lines, but what makes it really fun is playing, those props, parlays, and futures. So that's FanDuel.com. And there might not be playoff baseball in Chicago, but you can make the drive up I-94 to catch the Milwaukee Brewers in the postseason. Also, you got the Chicago Blackhawks regular season about to start, and it's always a show worth seeing live with Connor Bedard on the ice. And if you want to get tickets at the best price, use the Game Time app. The lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Always be on the lookout for Game Time Pick deals, like when they had a 50% off tickets for the Dodgers and Diamondbacks game this past Labor Day, and that's a pretty good value. Got a chance to, you can get it. They gave a chance to see two really good teams play each other at 50%. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? Game time. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all my everydayers. You might be like, well, wasn't Shane Reardon supposed to be on the show from 670 The Score? Scheduling conflict came up. I'm trying, we're going to reschedule. I want to get Shane on the show. I really like how he's just been hammering the team on 670. I know he's very controversial, but I'm a big fan of Shane's work. I think he's a great radio personality, and he's a really, passionate White Sox fan, even though, the Sox have really alienated him. So I'm hoping to get him on the show as soon as possible. All right, so you and I suffered through some terrible baseball. So that is why I'm looking forward to today's start of the MLB playoffs. So outside of opening day, my two favorite baseball days are the beginning of the wild card round and the beginning of the division series. There's just there's 4 games of good baseball. And yes, I'm a fan of the wild card round. You know why? I've accepted that it is a postseason tournament. Key word, postseason. 2 things can be true. Winning a division is a major accomplishment because of the slog of the 162 game schedule. Why do you think they have the champagne celebrations? You won a championship, you get to hang a banner. But getting bounced in the playoffs after playing a great, 162 game season is a perfect way to measure who is the best of the best. Why? Because baseball is a game of failure. And even the best have a couple of bad days during the season. The only difference between the regular season and the postseason is there's more tomorrows in the regular season to not amplify those bad stretches, and it makes up for the randomness of happening, makes up, to make up for the randomness of a potential bad week or a bad couple of games happening. The bad week or the bad couple of games only gets amplified in October because there are less tomorrows. That's it. Accept it. And the only reason why I say this is you're going to get these people who are going to clamor for the old school days of a smaller playoff field. I remember it last year, everybody was losing their minds. The Diamondbacks made it all the way to the World Series. They didn't have the greatest regular season. But you got to remember, if you go back to 2 divisions and the top 2 division winners getting in, you're going to completely ignore years like 1987 when the Twins won the whole thing after winning, 87 games? Or like 1990 when the Sox won 90 games and they missed the playoffs because the A's were in the same division and they won 100 games. But Boston got to go to the playoffs and they won like 88 games because they were in a different division. It's a long season. You have a good enough year. You should be rewarded. So that's why I'm fine with the wild card round, and I'm going to die on that hill. Now, the other reason is worth watching is I want to see how the Royals and the Detroit Tigers do in the playoffs. Those teams obviously owe the Sox a share of a championship bonus if they win the whole thing. Underdog.com's Jared Carabas, he tweeted this out at Jared_Carabas. He tweeted out basically, what would the Guardians, Royals, and Tigers record be if they didn't play the White Sox? The Guardians would be 84-63. And remember, the Sox beat the Guardians 5 times, so that is why they wouldn't owe the Sox a thing. But the Tigers would be 76-73. The Royals, 73-74. And just for good measure, to show you how overrated the Twins were for most of the season and how it is justice to see that they didn't make it, the Royals would be 70-77. So though the Tigers and the Royals definitely owe some Sox players a share of their playoff bonus if they end up somehow winning the whole thing. And I'm interested to see how far the Tigers can go since they're coming in hot. I love that dynamic of when does the hot team cool off? And you can never count on Houston in the playoffs. I think it's important for the Tigers to get game 1 with Tariq Skubal pitching. I do think the Royals might run out of time with the Orioles. Obviously, the Orioles, they finally got their ace in Corbin Burns. However, they do have to hope like heck he doesn't turn in another performance like he did last year for the Milwaukee Brewers in 2023. And as you know, my National League team is the Milwaukee Brewers. I worked in their scoreboard operations from 2003 to 2014. So I saw a lot of bad baseball. They grew on me. Covered them for years too. And I live a few exits away. So that's obviously going to be my passion choice. But I also suggest if you're a hater of the Cubs, this is the team you want to adopt because there will be nothing sweeter than the Brewers finally winning the World Series, or at least getting there, or at least winning a playoff series after Craig Counsell shockingly left his hometown team to manage the Cubs. The Crew went 1-9 in their last 10 playoff games he managed for them. So it'd just be fun to see the Brewers finally win in the playoffs after Craig Counsell's gone. I mean, he is still despised up in Wisconsin. Then I think the Padres got the best matchup with the Braves because the Braves are just limping into the playoffs. Chris Sale couldn't pitch in yesterday's doubleheader with the Mets because of back spasms, and the Braves just seem to be running out of gas. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. I will be back tomorrow to discuss which player's status with the team is up in the air and who should not be back next season. Feel free to leave comments about today's topics regarding Garrett Crochet possibly being traded in the offseason, Paul Hoover as a potential candidate for the Sox manager job, and getting some darn good baseball to watch with the playoffs after suffering through this Sox season. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.